question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the honourable member Grant Robertson.
This casino bill is a disgraceful piece of legislation built off a dodgy deal done without transparency or accountability and off the back of morally bankrupt exploitation of problem gamblers. It is the epitaph of this government. Cronyism. Make the deals with the vested interests. Make the deals with their mates and ignore New Zealanders' interests. Mr. Speaker, Sky City's a business. They saw a chance to make some money. They saw a chance to avoid some costs. They saw a chance and they went for it. And whatever I might think of that, Mr. Speaker, they're a business looking out for themselves. Well, I've got a message for John Key. New Zealand is not some corporation that he gets to play around with. New Zealand is a democracy with a good reputation for transparency and accountability. New Zealanders expect honesty and accountability from their leaders, and John Key has failed to deliver honesty and accountability on this. New Zealand is not a corporation to be John Key's plaything. He needs to respect New Zealanders' wishes that we have an accountable government, we have a transparent government, and we have a government that is upfront with its citizens. Mr. Speaker, this government owes its citizens much more than dodgy, tawdry deals like this one. It owes its citizens some respect for their interests and respect for the basic rules of democracy. That has been absent from John Key's dodgy deal from day one. And let us start at the beginning, Mr. Speaker, with the whole process of awarding this contract. The Auditor General the Deputy Auditor General has done her report on this. And John Key likes to tell the House that he has been totally vindicated by that report. He says that the government was totally vindicated by the Deputy Auditor General's report, except, Mr. Speaker, for the fact that the Deputy Auditor General says that the process for awarding this contract to Sky City was flawed, it was not transparent, and it was not even-handed. They are the words of the Auditor General, and John Key tries to claim that this process was okay. Well, I can tell members of the House when this process went dodgy, when this process became non-transparent. It was when John Key wrote on the top of a briefing note on the 24th of August 2009, "Close off the Sky City angle." That's what John Key wrote on that briefing paper, and from that moment on, Mr. Speaker, all the officials working on this process directed their energy towards Sky City and no one else. And the other bidders in this process were not given a fair go. And the Auditor General actually says that. She says, "We regard the failure to clearly communicate the government's position as symptomatic of the lack of attention to procedural risk and gives rise to concerns about the fairness and credibility of this process." That is the Auditor General saying the other people who were bidding to build this convention centre were not treated the same as Sky City. Sky City was taken out of this and taken away by the government and dealt with differently. That is not the kind of fairness or transparency that New Zealanders expect. And Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is donkey deep in this dodgy deal. In May 2009, he met with the Chief Executive of Sky City. In July 2009, his Chiefs of Staff met with Sky City officials. In August 2009, he told officials to close off the Sky City angle. In 15 October 2009, Bill English gets alongside the Sky City officials, and then by November 2009, it's another of John Key's mandates. He's there with the Sky City Chief Executive finishing off this deal. Mr. Speaker, no other bidder got those opportunities. They were only afforded to Sky City. This is a dodgy deal. This is cronyism. This is looking after vested interests. This is looking after their mates, Mr. Speaker, not New Zealanders' mates. So this dodgy deal from day one was wrong, and the Auditor General has been clear about that. Then the government comes to this House with a bill that binds future governments into concessions to these people. 230 extra pokie machines, 40 extra gaming tables, cashless gaming machines, ticket in, ticket out machines, a whole load of concessions. A whole load of concessions that include a 35-year extension to the licence. Those concessions, Mr. Speaker, will increase gambling harm. And it is outrageous for Stephen Joyce to stand up in this House today and say, we can't say whether there will be an increase in gambling harm. What the regulatory impact statement says, Mr Speaker, is we can't say just how much it'll be. But there'll be an increase in gambling harm. There will be. And what they estimate, Mr Speaker, in this report is that there will be around 8,000 extra potential problem gamblers because of this change. Because of this change, Mr Speaker. And it's interesting to note that the government had the option of amending the Gambling Act rather than bringing in this new piece of legislation. And the reason that the government has not gone ahead with amending the Gambling Act rather than introducing this new piece of legislation is in the regulatory impact statement, Mr Speaker. And what it says is that the Gambling Act's purpose is minimising the harm caused by gambling. So they can't amend that bill because this bill would be against that purpose. That's why they can't amend the Gambling Act, is because the Gambling Act says we should minimise gambling harm. This bill increases gambling harm, and that's why they have to do a standalone piece of legislation. If nothing else, Mr Speaker, what that must tell New Zealanders is that this bill is about increasing gambling harm, and the trade-offs that this government thinks it's making between building a convention centre and 8,000 extra problem gamblers have been accurately described today by Campbell Roberts from the Salvation Army. He has made absolutely clear that the harm minimisation measures in this bill are a joke. They are neither robust nor effective, and they don't represent any significant improvement on the current ineffective practices of the Sky City Casino. Mr Speaker, this government is making gambling harm worse. They have introduced this bill today that will get 8,000 extra potential problem gamblers. But at the same time, Sky City's laughing all the way to the bank, Mr Speaker, because Sky City can extract the extra profits and they won't have to go through the process that other people in the gambling sector will. By having their licence extended, it means that they don't have to undergo the statutory renewal processes that they would in 2021 or in 2036. In doing so, Mr Speaker, not only does that save them money, it means that the public don't get to know. The public don't get to know what is going on in terms of what Sky City does. It removes the opportunity for local authority input. It moves the opportunity for public input into the licence renewal proposals for Sky City. Mr Speaker, on that point alone, the government members should hang their head in shame, that they are prepared to extend the licence of Sky City so that the public and local authority in Auckland won't be able to have a say. Mr Speaker, that is shameful. So on all counts, Mr Speaker, the dodgy process, the bill that comes to this House that extends the licence, that creates extra problem gamblers, that we can't even use the Gambling Act because the Gambling Act says reduce harm. That's why Labor brought it in 2003. That's why the government's avoiding it today, because they know this legislation will increase gambling harm. Mr Speaker, today is meant to be a personal vote or a conscience vote. There is no personal vote or conscience vote coming from the national side. And I can tell you why we know that, Mr Speaker, because we know there are members on that side of the House who understand the impact of gambling harm, who understand how it destroys families, who understand the damage that it does right across communities. They in the past have stood up against problem gambling, and today they don't. They are not exercising their consciences, Mr Speaker. John Key has systematically and deliberately undermined basic New Zealand values through this dodgy deal. It is shameful legislation, Mr Speaker, and national members who are today being prevented from exercising their consciences know this. This is morally wrong. This bill is morally bankrupt. The Labor Party is disgusted by this bill, Mr Speaker. We will not be bullied out of making changes to gambling law because of what this government says. If we see gambling harm when we're in government, Mr Speaker, we will legislate to deal with gambling harm, Mr Speaker. John Key cannot get away with this dodgy, tawdry deal. It is morally bankrupt and the Labor Party is utterly opposed to it.
I call the honourable member Jonathan Young.
Well, the previous Labor government